crews in Ukraine are battling damage to critical infrastructure, trying to restore power, heat, other basic services during constant strikes from Russian drones. Officials in Kyiv, the capital, say 2 people were injured in the latest barrage. They say they did manage to take down 30 of the 35 drones fired. Joining me now to discuss, Major General James Spider Marks, CNN military analyst. Good to have you back on.
Merry Christmas, Jim. Thank you.
To you as well. You know, a lot of talk, and this has been consistent throughout the wars, how quickly and how advanced are the air defenses that the U.S. and the West are getting to Ukraine to fight this barrage here. The latest discussion is of Patriot missile systems. How quickly can they get in there, and what difference will they make? Will they make a difference against the strikes we've seen recently?
Well, it sure will make a difference. The Patriot is an enhanced capability over what's existing right now in Ukraine. Look, by improving the efficacy of the air defense capabilities, and as you described, 30 of the 35 or so drones were shot down, you're going to increase that coverage that will exist. And there will be very, I would say, very strongly defended priority targets are for protection, infrastructure, power generation, schools, hospitals, etc. So those will be protected, and the Patriots will give that capability. The key is how quickly can they get in? I mean, that's anybody's guess. Look, there's a large training arm that's associated with it. There's a pipeline necessary in order to get sufficiently equipped soldiers on the ground to work this system. Mm-hmm. But until they are, you're going to see what you're seeing right now. These images, the Russians are going to take complete advantage of the overkill that they have right now in terms of the use of drones and dumb rockets. Artillery certainly is a backup system as well.
There has been some concern about Putin potentially opening up another front for some time from Belarus, and it was notable that he visited Belarus this weekend. Of course, Belarusian army has its own issues, but do you have any concern that that may become a reality in the coming days and weeks?
Well, absolutely. I mean, if the Russians were to open up this other front just north of Kyiv, look, this is where the Russians were postured in advance of the invasion on the 24th of February. Certainly, the Ukrainians have to be concerned about that, since all the fighting effort that's taken place has been in that southeast corner. So certainly, this is a legitimate concern, and it would, disperse the Ukrainian defensive capabilities. But what they've been able to prove on the ground in terms of their engagement against the Russians has been quite remarkable. And we've seen over the course of the last 9 months that we're not surprised by the Ukrainian capability to engage directly with Russian forces. Look, the Russian forces have not improved their overall force structure, their absolute leadership challenges that they've demonstrated their incompetence when they get engaged with Ukrainian forces. So I think if the Russians were to do that, they would find themselves in a similar situation where the Ukrainians will outfox them, outfight them, outmaneuver them.
There has been some public commentary from Ukrainian officials that Russia is building a new offensive in the new year, a big one. I've spoken to U.S. officials who are skeptical that Russia has the capability to do so. Do you think that that is a genuine potential?
I don't. As we've just discussed and as we've seen over the course of the last 9 months, the Russian military has not been able to address its fundamental challenges. Look, in order for Russia to present a new type of Russian military into the fight, it's going to be a generational change. I mean, they're going to have to create non-commissioned officers. They're going to have to get new kit. They're going to have to get more creativity down to the fighting level. This is a hierarchical military that only exists in a very structured environment, very hidebound. They don't have the initiative. They don't have the non-commissioned officers and the leaders to take charge. So if they were to put additional forces on the ground, you're going to see what we've seen over the course of the last 9 months, which is Russian forces engaged with Ukrainians that are going to get slaughtered, which means the Russians are going to have to back up and do what we're seeing now, which is launch long-range missiles and launch artillery to try to achieve their objectives, which is a battle of wills against the Ukrainian people.
Yeah, scorched earth strategy, it seems. Major General Spider Marks, good to have you on this morning.
And these attacks on infrastructure have knocked out power across Ukraine, leaving millions in the dark during what is setting in to be a very brutal winter with incredibly low temperatures. But President Zelensky says this will not deter his country from fighting back.
На що б там не розраховували.
Whatever the rocket worshippers from Moscow are counting for, it still won't change the balance of power in this war. They still have enough missiles for several such massive strikes. We will have enough determination and self-belief to return what is ours after these strikes.
Вистачить цілеспрямованості.
So joining us now is CNN military analyst and retired Air Force Colonel Cedric Leighton. You know, the point of this is to basically destroy morale across Ukraine. But Zelensky is trying to make the argument that it's not working.
That's right, Caitlin. And I think he's actually got a real point there because, yes, on an individual basis, you're going to find a lot of people who are affected personally, you know, people that they know are wounded or have been killed in the war. They're personally suffering shortages of electricity and water and things like that. But there's this resilience within Ukraine that is really amazing to behold. And Zelensky is reflecting that in the way he's actually talking about this. And he's also, by doing this, he's also furthering that whole idea of resistance and making it a resilient society, something that you would never expect to have happened in a country like Ukraine.
Let's be realistic about this. We're in the waning days of December. We're in the waning days of 2022. You and I started reporting on this, was at night, February, right?
That's right.
It'll almost be a year.
Yeah.
The conditions are horrific. I've been there in the winter. It is cold.
Yeah.
Give us the conditions of the war right now.
So you've got this bone-chilling cold that everybody is dealing with on both sides. The Russians are woefully unprepared for this cold, which is kind of surprising because they train in the Arctic. They've got large areas of territory that are within the Arctic Circle, but they don't have the supplies that they need to in order to sustain this kind of a force. On the Ukrainian side, they're getting a lot more from the West that will help them on a personal basis for each individual soldier take care of the cold aspect of this, but they also are getting weapons supplies. Their supply line is much better serviced than that of the Russians, and it's really making a big difference in the way in which the Ukrainians can prosecute this war. Now, it doesn't mean that the Ukrainians are going to be able to win this war outright, but it means that they can at least at this point sustain what they've been able to do and keep what they've been able to regain from the Russians at this point.
Obviously, you're no stranger to war. Did you expect it to go on this long, and how much long? There's no end in sight, correct?
Yeah, there's no end in sight right now. I did not expect it to go on this long, but I also think that you know, it's really up to Putin, President Putin of Russia, to decide at which point he is going to withdraw these forces, and that is really going to be the critical element here. When does he decide to do it? How does he decide to do it? And he's obviously going to try to save face. There's going to be some kind of a settlement at some point, but we're not there yet, and the Ukrainians aren't going to want to give up any territory.
And it's having massive impacts on the U.S. The New York Times had that really comprehensive look yesterday about military spending and what the war in Ukraine has done when it comes to all these private companies that are making all of this, and the timelines of what it looks like and how speeding it up is just something that is not something they could do in the near future.
Well, that points to the defense industrial base in this country. We are not prepared. We were not prepared to sustain a war of this type for somebody else. And we were certainly not prepared for something that isn't a quick war like we had, say, in the first stages of Operation Iraqi Freedom or in Desert Storm. We kind of focused our military on those kinds of wars and fighting counterterrorism type operations. But in this particular case, we are not seeing that.
But I thought Vladimir Putin thought it would be 10 days or so, right?
Oh, yeah, much less than that even. He thought he'd be marching his troops down the main streets of Kyiv in 3 days.
3 days.
They had their parade uniforms in their tanks.
That was so fascinating to me. They brought their parade uniforms and their medals because, like, they essentially did not pack enough food, did not pack enough weapons, the Russian troops did, but they brought their uniforms thinking they were going to have a celebration within days.
We saw all of those tanks parked along the way that Ukrainians had taken out.
Right.
Much of a surprise to Russia.
Absolutely. And, you know, they thought they were going to go on parade in those 3 days. Obviously didn't happen. That 40-mile-long convoy that had a lot of those troops in there, total disaster for the Russians. And it really shows that you can never predict how quickly these wars are going to end when you start them.
Colonel, thank you. It's always a pleasure to see you.
Same here, Don.